Hi, my name is Jeremy Faulkner, and I will be doing my presentation on Chapter 7, Moral Development. Chapter 7 deals with primarily four subsections: moral thought, moral behavior, moral feeling, and moral personality. Central to Kohlberg's research is the Heinz dilemma. The Heinz dilemma was a scenario involving a husband and druggist. The husband had a wife who was deathly sick, and the druggist had come up with a cure but was charging 10 times the amount that it cost him to produce it. The husband finally comes up with half the amount he needs to buy the drug, approaches the druggist, and the druggist then tells him that he had developed a cure and deserved to make a profit from it. The husband deducts that he must break into the store, steal the drug, and give it to his wife. The formulation of one's answer to this is what determines where they would reason at in Lawrence Kohlberg's moral development theory. From here, I will describe Lawrence Kohlberg's three levels of moral development as well as these six stages. You will see how each person reasons at each stage and why the lowest is the low and the highest is the high. In stage 1, obedience and punishment driven, individuals focus on the direct consequences of their actions on themselves. For example, an action is perceived as morally wrong because the perpetrator is punished. The last time I did that, I got spanked, so I will not do it again. The worse the punishment for the act is, the more bad the act is perceived to be. This can give rise to an inference that even innocent victims are guilty in proportion to their suffering. It is egocentric, lacking recognition that others' points of view are different from one's own. There is deference to superior power or prestige. The pre-conventional level of moral reasoning is especially common in children, although adults can also exhibit this level of reasoning. Reasoners at this level judge the morality of an action by its direct consequences. The pre-conventional level consists of the first and second stages of Kohlberg's moral development and is solely concerned with the self in an egocentric manner. A child with pre-conventional morality has not yet adopted or internalized society's conventions regarding what is right or wrong, but instead focuses largely on external consequences that certain actions may bring. In stage 3, the self enters society by filling social roles. Individuals are receptive to approval or disapproval from others as it reflects society's accordance with the perceived role. They try to be a good boy or good girl to live up to those expectations, having learned that there is inherent value in doing so. Stage 3 reasoning may judge the morality of an action by evaluating its consequences in terms of a person's relationships, which now begin to include things like respect, gratitude, and the golden rule. I want to be liked and thought well of. Apparently, not being naughty makes people like me. Desire to maintain rules and authority exists only to further support these social roles. The intentions of actors play a more significant role in reasoning at this stage. They mean well. In stage 4, it is important to obey laws, dictums, and social conventions because of their importance in maintaining and functioning society. Moral reasoning in stage 4 is thus beyond the need for individual approval exhibited in stage 3. A central ideal or ideals often prescribe what is right and wrong, such as in the case of fundamentalism. If one person violates a law, perhaps everyone would. Thus, there is an obligation and a duty to uphold laws and rules. When someone does violate a law, it is morally wrong. Culpability is thus a significant factor in this stage, as it separates the bad domains from the good ones. Most active members of society remain at stage 4, where morality is still predominantly dictated by an outside force. The post-conventional level, also known as the principled level, is marked by a growing realization that individuals are separate entities from society, and that the individual's own perspective may take precedence over society's view. Individuals may disobey rules inconsistent with their own principles. Post-conventionalist moralists live by their own ethical principles, principles that typically include such basic human rights as life, liberty, and justice. People who exhibit post-conventional morality view rules as useful but changeable mechanisms. Ideally, rules can maintain the general social order and protect human rights. Rules are not absolute dictates that must be obeyed without question. Because post-conventional individuals elevate their own moral evaluation of a situation over social conventions, their behavior, especially at stage 6, can be confused with that of those at the pre-conventional level. Some theorists have speculated that many people may never reach this level of abstract moral reasoning. The post-conventional level, also known as the principled level, is marked by a growing realization that individuals are separate entities from society, and that the individual's own perspective may take precedence over society's view. Individuals may disobey rules inconsistent with their own principles. Post-conventionalist moralists live by their own ethical principles, principles that typically include such basic human rights as life, liberty, and justice. People who exhibit post-conventional morality view rules as useful but changeable mechanisms. Ideally, rules can maintain the general social order and protect human rights. Rules are not absolute dictates that must be obeyed without question. Because post-conventional individuals elevate their own moral evaluation of a situation over social conventions, their behavior, especially at stage 6, can be confused with that of those at the pre-conventional level. Some theorists have speculated that many people may never reach this level of abstract moral reasoning. Kohlberg found the use of stages as critical in moral education. The goal of moral education is to encourage individuals to develop to the next stage of moral reasoning. Initial educational efforts employing Kohlberg's theory were grounded in basic Piaget assumptions of cognitive development. Development in this model is not merely the result of gaining more knowledge, but rather consists of a sequence of qualitative changes in the way an individual thinks. Within any stage of development, thought is organized according to the constraints of that stage. An individual then interacts with the environment according to their basic understandings of the environment. However, the child will at some point encounter information which does not fit into their worldview, forcing the child to adjust their view to accommodate this new information. This process is called equilibration, and it is through equilibration that development occurs. Early moral development approaches to education therefore sought to force students to ponder contradiction inherent to their present level of moral reasoning. Lawrence Kohlberg, without a doubt, has his share of critics. His theory has been criticized for being too focused on moral thought and not on moral behavior. His critics argued that many people could reason at the post-conventional level, but the behavior that resulted from these people showed that they were at the lower level. Albert Bandura, a social cognitive theorist, goes further with the dichotomy between moral thought and behavior, and adds that when people separate themselves from blame due to a higher purpose, such as religion, they can be especially dangerous, such as in the case of the 9/11 attacks. Others have argued that his research is ethnocentric and is focused on Western culture from the 1950s. Carol Gilligan, for example, argues that Kohlberg's research is focused on the male perspective. A self-proclaimed feminist and teacher at the University of Cambridge, she claims that women respond differently than men and look at relationships as the guiding force in determining the morally correct way to view the world. She argues that Kohlberg's theories do not take a woman's perspective into account when deciding at what level they reason. In later studies, she also found that often men even looked at relationships as well as a guiding factor in decision-making. I would urge you to watch the video on Mahara that I have placed on my web page. Thank you. Despite Kohlberg's critics, his research really is the launching point for many of his critics, and he is without a doubt one of the most influential researchers in the field of moral development psychology. We will take a step now towards the final 3 domains of moral development: moral behavior, moral feeling, and moral personality. When adolescents are positively reinforced for behavior that is consistent with laws and social conventions, they are likely to repeat that behavior. When models who behave morally are provided, adolescents are likely to adopt their behavior. And when adolescents are punished for immoral or unacceptable behavior, those behaviors can be eliminated. Research shows that even though adolescents can often be egocentric and selfish, there often are occurrences of altruism. The question of whether adolescents have gender differences between them exists, and it seems as though some believe that females engage in more prosocial behavior. Most of these prosocial behaviors exhibited by females were in kind and considerate behavior, and some in sharing. In a study by Gustavo Carlo, he confirmed the presence of 6 types of prosocial behavior: altruism, public, emotional, dire, anonymous, and compliant. In this study, adolescent girls reported more emotional, dire, complaint, and altruistic behavior than did boys, while boys engaged in more public, prosocial behavior. Parental monitoring was positively related to emotional, dire, and compliant behavior, but not to the other types of behavior. Compliant, anonymous, and altruistic prosocial behavior were positively related to religiosity. Moral feelings are when adolescents have strong feelings, and these emotions influence the adolescents to act in accord with the standards of right and wrong. Moral feelings do not operate in a vacuum and do not provide the substance of moral regulation. Thus, they require the regulation of rules, values, and standards of behavior that adolescents need to understand and act on. There are 3 key aspects to moral personality: moral identity, moral character, and moral exemplars. Moral identity is the central moral notions and commitments to one's own life that guides them through making moral decisions. The moral character is the requirement of a commitment to the moral goals one has set in life in order to carry them out. Moral exemplars are people who have lived exemplary lives. These are people who we look up to and guide us in helping us to determine how we should live our lives in moral contexts. Thank you for viewing my lesson on the 4 domains of moral development. I would ask that you please comment in the forum Afternoon Moral Development Chapter 7 at the top of my Mahara page. Please comment specifically on one thing that you learned from my video and one thing that you would have liked to learn more about. In addition, please view my lesson plan activity and give me some feedback on how you would learn in this situation and one thing that would work best for you in a group discussion framework for learning. Thank you very much, and that is all. My name is Jeremy Faulkner.